Hello everyone, my name is Cleo, I'm a reader based out of Dublin, Ireland, and I have been reading all my life. I've been a reader all my life, but I have not read consistently over all my life, if that makes any sense. So in today's video, I'm going to explain a bit of my journey as a reader, and why I have always considered myself a reader, even when I wasn't physically able to read a lot at the time. That being said, let's get started. Right, so preface, I am 23 years old, and I have been reading, like I said, my whole life. I grew up, my mom has always loved reading. She is a reading fiend. That woman goes through so many books. If she used Storygraph, I guarantee you I would be terrified to see her yearly wrap up every year because it would all be just horrifyingly large numbers of most likely either literary books or smut. Sorry, Mom. I know she's gonna see this. I'm so sorry, Mom. Um, yeah, it took me a long time to realize why she never wanted me to read her Kindle over her shoulder. When I was older, I realized, oh, never mind, I don't want to know what she's reading. I'm sorry, Mom. It's all gonna be historical fiction and smut. That's it. That's all it is. Okay, get myself together. So I grew up with Mom reading all the time, even if I didn't know what she was reading necessarily. But I grew up with her reading all the time, right? And so I always was like, yeah, I always wanted to read. I always liked reading. I was put into a gifted program in first grade, kindergarten. I don't remember when, because again, this was a long time ago. I don't remember exactly when I was put into the program, but I was put into a gifted kid program, like a year advanced program, when I was somewhere in the kindergarten, first grade area, which, man, my parents did have me tested, by the way. For autism and ADHD. The psychiatrist was like, no, she's too smart for it. Anyway, I'm seeking out a new diagnosis for those. Because clearly, um, yeah, anyway, I was reading at like a collegiate level, like a nerd, since I was like 5 or 6, big nerd, I always liked reading. I had my nose in a book. I was always reading shit. Yeah, I was reading like middle grade YA books when I was like 5 or 6. Yeah, like aimed towards the lower end of the YA spectrum, so like aimed at tweens, but like totally still YA books. I was reading like Percy Jackson. I read The Hunger Games. I read Divergent. I read a lot of books. I read a lot of books. I read so much of the Warrior Cat series. Oh my god, I've just unlocked a section of my brain. I read so many of the Warrior Cats books. Yeah, I read so many of the Warrior Cats books. My favorite book as a child was The Secret Garden. For the record, still love that book, but I would reread a chunk of it over and over again. I don't even remember what chunk it was, but I would reread it over and over again because I loved it so much. I loved the way it was written. I loved the part of the story it was telling. I would reread that section over and over again. So yeah, I've been reading like since bitty. I'm still pretty bitty, but like I'm only 5'2", but I am but like since I was bitty, I've been reading. And I ended up, so I have dyslexia and dysgraphia, and then of course there's the aforementioned HD autism, which I was too smart to have. Um, uh, those, and then there is something in the depression family because I am on an SSRI, which has helped me phenomenally. So there's something in the like depression family, but we don't know what it is because getting mental like a psychiatrist assessment here is difficult. In Ireland is difficult. So we treated it, we were like, let's try you on an SSRI, see if that works. It worked. So we're not looking any further until I can get my ADHD and autism assessment done. And then I will go to the psychiatrist and be like, hey, so I am on this medication. It helps a lot. Maybe we should figure out what actually it is. Just a thought. But, so there's like stuff in that range. And I only bring this up because this is particularly relevant to like my like neurological development, of course. I am like, if you follow me on Instagram, you know I'm pretty open about like being disabled and chronically ill. If you follow me here, then you may have watched my vlogs, in which case you will have probably seen how it like affects me physically, because I talk a lot about like the physical symptoms a lot more on my vlogs and stuff. I mean, I just cracked all of my knuckles, and that is like a huge part, like that joint sort of like cracking and popping is a huge part of one of my physical conditions, but it's not really relevant. Those aren't really relevant to reading. Not as a child anyway. You know, I had dyslexia, I had dysgraphia. My dyslexia and dysgraphia got worse as I got older, but like even as a kid, I struggled with it. I struggled with like ADHD, with autism, all of that kind of stuff. I like, still my mom's greatest gripe in that like, I don't ask people questions about things because my brain is like, oh, if they want to tell me this information, they will offer it up. I don't have to go asking if they want me to know this information. My mom it drives her crazy. I'm sorry, Mom. I don't understand that. I don't understand asking people to offer up information about themselves. If they want to tell me, they will offer. I don't understand, Mom. Anyway, dyslexia and dysgraphia has always made it difficult for like the actual physicality of reading. In fact, it leaves me like somewhat functionally illiterate on bad days, so that's fun. I love being functionally illiterate because I can look at words and just be like, this is just a bunch of squiggles. Whoops. So that's always been like an issue, is the like sort of like the inability to read wholesale sometimes. But it does make me a very fast reader because of the way I've had to cope with that. Because I read in paragraphs. Dylan thinks this is crazy. Alex also thinks this is crazy. In that I read whole paragraphs just into my brain, and then I process the whole information in that whole paragraph. It could be long ass paragraphs. The paragraph could be half a page, and I will just read it as a single thing, and I will get all the information in. It makes me a very fast reader. Also it also helps me get around a lot of the like dyslexia issues of like the words spinning and the letters spinning, because if the way I'm looking at it that way is by looking at it as shape, not as words, and look at it as a shape, suddenly everything is okay. So a lot of it about how I'm like like sort of directing the information through my like visual cortex almost. Because if I look at it as like words, then I'm going to direct it to my visual cortex, which is not going to work. To my like through my visual cortex to my language processing center, which is not going to work. But if I do it to my sort of like pattern recognition center of my brain, suddenly everything works. I don't understand how it works, but you know, it works for me. But regardless, so I was pulled out of a traditional school and into homeschooling when I was 7 due to all that, which, you know, homeschooling meant that I read a lot, you know, because I would do my little classes, and then on my little online classes, I would do my little assignments, and then I'd go and read just for hours and hours and hours. I would just read and read and read and read and read and read and read. I loved reading. I reread books all the time. I would read new books all the time. I loved reading. Genuinely. I read so much as a child. I could blast through like 400-page books in an afternoon. I mean, technically I still can. I'm still fast enough for it. But I cannot focus like I used to as a kid. I genuinely think it's because of like real life stress and the state of the universe. But like, you know, when I was a child and had no stress and no worries and very few responsibilities, I could just read and read and read and read, and it was fine. My dad also has dyslexia and dysgraphia, and he never has been able to understand how I could just like read information like so fast. And read so much, because he struggles with it so much. He struggles with reading a lot. He really likes audiobooks for that reason. He likes audiobooks when he does partake, because that's way more accessible for him. Anytime I listen to an audiobook, it is, we share an audiobook account. We share an Audible account. So anytime I listen to an audiobook, it is on his Audible account, so I get to like scroll through what he's been listening to. And he gets to scroll through what I've been listening to. It's very fun. Being a reader and reading at that point were one and the same, right? They were all tied up with each other. It was when we moved when I was 13, and I went to high school and went back to a physical brick and mortar school, right? That everything changed. And those two terms, those two concepts, being a reader and reading, and the act of reading, started to like separate from each other, because I was always still a reader, because it's hinged the way I've interacted with media my whole life. I've always interacted with media as if it were a book with subtext that I could like pick apart, because I've always been like that. Um, I'm particularly anal. I'm sure my family has stories they could tell about me being particularly anal about everything as a 7-year-old. I can't wait to see my mom and my aunt in the comment section being like, oh yes, here's a story about little Cleo who was particularly anal about a thing that makes us all laugh. Um, don't worry, it makes me laugh too. They wouldn't tell any they wouldn't tell any stories that I would not laugh at. I went back to school and suddenly I'm being like dumped back into like social situations constantly that I don't know how to handle. I'm in physical school for like 7 hours a day. I have like classes and homework and extracurriculars because I was an athlete as a kid. I was an athlete as a child, teenager especially. And this is where like a lot of my brain fog and a lot of my fatigue sort of like starts. It got a lot worse when I moved here for university, and specifically within the last like 2 years. But this is where it sort of begins, and I started to fall out of love with the act of reading. I did not fall out of love with books. I did not fall out of love with being a reader, but I fell out of love with the act of reading, and so I didn't read as much as I wanted to. For all the passion that I had, I didn't have the energy for it. I had so much to do. Again, it was a school for the profoundly gifted. You know, it was a lot of work. And so I really, really struggled with continuing to be able to read. On my 18th birthday, I sort of, because my birthday's in January, so this was like a combination of like this was like a, combination of a New Year's resolution and like sort of a promise to myself on my birthday, because my birthday's the 10th of January. So I was like, this is like right in that like about a week, just under a week or just over a week. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get back into reading. I miss reading because I had always been thinking about it throughout all of high school, how much I missed reading. I always had books everywhere. Books all over, like all stacked up beside my bed. Books on my tables, bookcases. I always had books. I loved books. I loved reading. I loved reading. It was something I loved even when I physically could not handle it. And so it was devastating to not be able to read, to not be able to sit there and like read a book. And so from New Year's resolution, my 18th birthday, I promised myself I would read more. And that is actually how I started the Paper of Hemlock sort of like brand, I guess, because that's when I started the Instagram account that I still use today. And I made it as a promise to myself to start reading. And so I got into doing content creation through doing book reviews. And I still identify it with that concept quite a lot. Like, book reviews is something that's still very valuable to me. I also met Dylan through this, through doing all this stuff, so that's pretty great. I met one of my best friends in the whole wide world. I met Dylan through this. I met Gus through this. They're like, those two are like two of my best friends in the whole wide world. I met Ren through later on down the line when I started doing cosplay, but I met them those three people who are like three of my best friends in the whole wide world. Those are people who I would trust to wipe my search history and delete my O3 account upon my death. Like, you know what I mean? Those are the three people I trust with that. Like, I wouldn't have been able to meet some people who are so deeply important, and I met them specifically through social media, but like, again, I wouldn't have gone to conventions if it wasn't for that kind of thing as well, so I wouldn't have like so many other friends if it wasn't for that. So this decision changed my life. This decision was a very good decision, and I'm actually thinking about writing a Substack post, which, if I've written it by the time this is up, maybe I'll put a card up here. I don't remember what side it's on. One of the sides, little card. There'll be a card with a link to it if I've written that Substack post by this point about how content creation saved my life. But anyway, so I started Paper of Hemlock as a concept, as a way to get myself back into reading. And it worked. It was really bumpy and it was a really rough go of things, starting out. Because it was all well and good to like promise myself to do that, but it was really hard to like keep going with it and like actually physically read. But it gave me the motivation to do so, content creation helped immensely. When I moved here for uni, I started within a year and a half, I got really burnt out with content creation because I was doing too much. I was pushing myself way too hard, creating way too much content, and I was sacrificing the quality for the quantity because I thought I needed quantity to be legitimate. I did not need quantity to be legitimate. I needed quality. So I got really burnt out, but I was able to identify it before I burnt out completely, step back a little bit, reduce my production rate. That helped a lot. Between content creation and uni, I was really burnt out at that time, so I needed to step back from content creation. I still created content, just less frequent, but my reading did slow. But this is actually where I started moving towards cosplay content, and that is what I primarily make on Instagram these days, is cosplay related content. So that's fun. I enjoy being a cosplayer and putting on costumes and doing photo shoots and stuff like that. I enjoy that a lot. It's a huge thing for me. It's a really good creative outlet for me. It's also been really great for my confidence, like in my appearance and like just physically, like, and how much space I take up as a person. It's been helpful. So that's pretty great. Yeah, I started moving towards cosplay content around that time because I realized that I loved creating content, but I didn't know that creating content about books was the only thing I wanted to do. I kind of wanted to diversify, and now it's slowly moved towards mostly cosplay. Now, a couple years ago, within the last two years, I'd say, I had a horrible, like, chronic illness decline. I started being in more pain. Like, when I moved here for college, I started having more and more pain. Now, I should say, I moved here at the end of COVID. I started Paper of Hemlock in the middle of COVID. It's very likely that I got COVID and didn't know I got COVID, which may be why I just got worse all of a sudden, right? Because I probably got COVID and didn't know, because I have such bad hay fever that I never notice when I'm sick unless I have such a bad fever that my skin starts to crawl, because I just assume that it's hay fever. I'm allergic to every single pollen on the face of the planet, except for literally one. So, being a little isn't, like, new to me. Being sniffly and runny nose and having a cough, it's not new to me. Even, like, having a low-grade fever wasn't new to me. Sometimes I would get that if I was having a particularly bad allergy attack. Didn't help that I have asthma, so, oh, you can't breathe? Cool. Use your inhaler. Right? So I probably got COVID and didn't notice. So, which is why when I moved here, things got worse. However, within the past 2 years, things got worse again, to the point that I couldn't think, I couldn't focus, I kind of stopped caring about things. I kept up with a lot of content creation stuff, but I had very little, like, love for it outside of, like, being in the moment, which sucked. But in the middle of all that, like, chronic fatigue and exhaustion and sheer joint agony all the time, and feeling like I was gonna faint all the time, I got an internship. I started an internship that I loved, loved, loved. It was an amazing internship. I enjoyed it so much. And that actually helped me start reading again, because I had sort of, like, drifted off of reading again in like my second year of uni, and so in 2025, I had that internship, and it gave me such a much better, like, schedule and let me read again. So I went from having not read anything since 2023 to reading 23 books in 2025, because this internship gave me, like, a strict schedule. I'm in at 9, I leave at 5:30. Once I'm clocked out, it ain't my business. And so I was able to, like, read, like, go home and read. I was able to go home and, like, rest and, like, recuperate and stuff like that. And that was really nice to be able to not bring work home, almost, because that was my thing with uni and with school as well as a kid. Was like, that's why I stopped reading a lot, is because I had to bring work home, and then that ate into my, like, ability to, like, chill out. And at that point, like, I didn't have the energy for a book. I didn't have the energy to read. Um, Even now, sometimes I don't have the energy for it. Like, it's hard, when you have chronic fatigue, it's hard to have energy for much of anything, so it's something of like, oh, I have to, like, decide between, am I going to partake in a hobby or am I going to eat dinner? Because I've only got energy for one of them, and that's hard. That's a hard spot to be in. But I started reading regularly during my internship, which was very helpful. And very much helped me get back into, like, the love of reading. I did a series of buddy reads with some of my friends. Me and Charlie did the Legends and Latte series. And then we did the the Temple of the White Rat, the Saint of Steel series by T. Kingfisher. We did that. We read those, and then me and Dylan buddy read Thursday Murder Club series, and then Alex bullied me into reading Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere, starting with Mistborn. I'm on the third Mistborn book, but I ended up being so sick by the end of the internship that I ended up taking a gap year, and I'm on a gap year currently, trying to get treatment and feel better. I do. I feel better now. I feel a lot better now. I will be able to go back to college come autumn, which is phenomenal. But this is also when I started YouTube. On this, like, sort of like, I can't. So it's when I started doing long form bookish content here. And again, that was part of the same sort of like, okay, let's get the ball rolling here and like go back to reading. I feel like every time I start a new content creation like thing, it's to do with reading. Everything brings me back to reading. So that's fun. But again, this gap year I've gotten back in touch with a lot of my hobbies, which is very nice. But reading is definitely one of them because I'm on medication now. It doesn't get rid of the fatigue and it doesn't get rid of the pain and it doesn't get rid of the fog, but I feel like myself a lot more, and that's pretty good. That's a good step. And so that's the kind of like thing of like so much of my, and I give you all of this information about my like medical history and stuff because for me, reading has always been inextricably tied up with my disabilities. First with dyslexia and dysgraphia, then with physical ailments. Now, like, it's always been so tied up in disability for me. Because to me, it was always like a safe space of solace to go to, like a bit of escapism, obviously, but also like a bit of a like. It's not hard to read. Reading is not difficult. Like when I'm in pain and cannot like really do much but like sit in bed, I can read a book, you know? Oh, the screens hurt so I can't like play a video game, let's say, or I can't watch a show. Okay, cool. I can read a book. That won't hurt my eyes, right? Oh, I'm in like a doctor's office waiting room, waiting to be seen by some specialist or another. Well, I can read. I can read in that waiting room because it'll probably be an extra hour from what I'm supposed to be in back there for them to actually come and get me. You know, like that is a benefit. Because a lot of being disabled is a lot of hurry up and wait, unfortunately. Um, and so having hobbies that are very accessible to hurry up and wait is very much to a benefit. So being able to like get back into reading, phenomenal for that. But also I find it really regulating. Reading really regulating. I still read over my like sort of like reading hiatus, but I read a lot of fanfic, which if you know anything about AO3, you know that there are some good fucking shit on there. There's some good fanfic on there. Mom, don't look up AO3. You don't need to know about the stuff I was reading. On there. Like I was still reading. I would read AO3, but I think another thing of the exhaustion portion for me was I didn't have the energy to get invested in new characters. So I would instead stick to characters that I was already invested in. Ergo, AO3. Read fanfic. But again, like I fanfic was pretty good. Like fanfic is pretty good if you like know what you're looking for. You can find some phenomenal fanfic. You know, we do have some fanfic being, you know, having the serial numbers like filed off and published as, you know, their own, published as like real fic, you know, as real like books. You know, the Life Hypothesis being Raylo fic, Game Changer being Stucky fic. You know, the two fics of the series that will not be named. Is it 2 or 3? 3. 3 fics for the series that will not be named, and possibly a fourth one being published as real fic. Except those 3 are not very much removed from the source material. So it's not really the filing isn't very good. Anyway, and I'm not here to like debate like the ethics of like filing serial numbers off. That's not what I'm here to debate. Because I think okay, I'm not here to debate it. Gonna give my fucking opinion anyway. I think it goes case by case. I think there are certain medium type pieces that should not have any sort of like anything about that accepted at all. The series that will not be named being like my big example. Um, I don't think that she, who shall not be named, should have any sort of platform. She's not dead yet, so, death of the author does not apply. Not when she is so actively harmful to trans people all around the world, but especially in the UK and Ireland. While she is so harmful, um, maybe don't file serial numbers off of fics of her work. Just a thought. um, or if you do, at least don't promote them as the serial numbers have been filed off. Like, don't outright promote them as, like, published fanfic. That's the big problem. Because it's not like with Love Hypothesis that, like, Ali Hazelwood, it was like, yeah, this is my Raylo fic. No, everyone just kind of knew because, she's a known quantity. She was a known quantity in the Raylo space. In the Raylo fandom. Cool. She didn't advertise it. Everyone just kind of knew. But the problem comes when publishers actively promote and like market books as being published fanfic. Don't do that. Don't do that. That is bad. That is how you get sued, and that's how you get so many problems for so many fanfic writers. That's how you get AO3 shut down. Don't do that. Don't do that. Do not do that. Thanks. So I was still reading the whole time. I was still reading fanfic all the time. I read constantly. I still found a lot of solace in reading, but I just didn't have the energy to, like, engage in new content and new characters and new worlds. I didn't have the energy for it. And that sucked because that was the part of reading that I loved. I loved, like, broadening my, like, imagination with new concepts and new ways that people, like, perceive the world and, like, frame the world. It's why I love writing, I love, like, taking my favorite bits of, like, a bunch of my favorite books and being like, okay, how do I world build with all of these parts that I really like and make it a thing that's cohesive and also mine, And that's, like, something that I just didn't have the energy for at the time, which sucked. But I remember it wasn't long after I'd been put on the SSRI that I'm on. I was talking to my dad, and he asked me something. And I can't remember exactly what the conversation was. My memory is not that good. I have a very bad memory. But he asked me something about the fact that I write fiction, and I did a lot when I was younger. And he asked me about it, and I started telling him about another project that I'm writing. And he just went, this was over the phone, and he just paused, and he went, "You haven't told me about your writing in a long time. I'm glad you're writing again." And after I got off that phone call, I did go and cry about it. Because I used to talk to him all the time about, like, the things I was writing and the things that I, like, was thinking in my head, like, these big branching narratives. I hadn't spoken to him in years about that stuff. Years, and he'd been my main, like, confidant, my main person to, like, bounce ideas off of. Because he really likes sci-fi and fantasy, and I'm largely, right, sci-fi and fantasy, so he was my person to, like, bounce ideas off of. And I hadn't been able to do that because I hadn't had the energy to even think about, like, new worlds. And after that phone call, I did go and cry about it. I was always reading, and then I couldn't have the energy to read. And that was devastating. So for me, a lot of, like, getting back into reading, one, has to do with, like, promising myself that I, will do things that I love for the love of the game and not just to play the game. If that makes any sense. But also, like, it's also, like, so intrinsically tied up in, like, my health and my, like, disability status and also, like, my treatment status. Like, I'm under a lot more treatment now than I was ever before. And so it's become a lot more accessible for me to engage with media and love media. And that's, like, a huge part of, like, my journey as a reader is, like, this sort of, like, up and down of, like, chronic illness, because I do think that I always had dysautonomia. I think I always had POTS. I think I always had, you know, hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos. I think I always had these things. I do think COVID probably made them worse. I probably got COVID and it made it a lot worse. I think I always probably have something to do, like something in the like mast cell activation syndrome kind of like flavor. Um, I get, I'm allergic to the combination of sunlight and heat, and I get dermatographia. I specifically have my camera closed right now, so I cannot see my view in the screen here. I have no idea because I just scratched my face here, I have no idea if I've burst into hives yet or not, or if my allergy meds haven't worn through. Those are like related to mast cell histamine reactions, whatever. I'm sure I've had all of these my whole life, but I do think that they got worse, you know, over COVID, that COVID made them worse, more pronounced. Ergo, me getting worse when I moved here, because I was in the middle of COVID. And after COVID ended, I would have immediately started walking a lot more because Dublin is a very walkable city. And so suddenly I was like, oh shit, I hurt all the time. Oh shit, I can't breathe. Oh shit, I can't, like, my heart is pounding constantly. What the hell is happening? So I think that, like, this was all stuff that was already happening. But it got worse, which is why, I was able to start reading at the end of COVID, start of me, like, walking around more and all that kind of stuff, start of going back to college and stuff. And then the moment my body was like, how about kill yourself? Immediately reading just went funk, and I immediately burnt out on content creation as well, which sucked. But yeah, for me, a lot of my journey as a reader has been so tied up in like my, my chronic illness and my disability and all that kind of stuff without me realizing that that's what it's tied up in, right? But it's always been tied up in like, oh, you have dyslexia and dysgraphia, but you like to read? Weird. Weird. Like, because it was distinctly considered a bit odd that I, like, not by my parents, for sure, but like by other people, who, when I would be like, oh yeah, I have dyslexia and dysgraphia, also my favorite hobby in the world is reading, and they would just kind of be like, you have the inability to read, learning disability, but you like to read? Huh? It was like that would always be, I could always see it in people, the fact that they didn't understand, they couldn't compute these two things together. Because my enjoyment of a thing has no bearing on if it's easy or not. You know what I mean? I think people struggle to understand that. But all of this is to say that if you are a reader, or if you want to be a reader, and you are struggling to get started, to find the energy, to find the wherewithal, the time, or to find the motivation to read, there are options. I started Paper of Hemlock as a, like, I guess, social media brand. I don't like calling it a brand because it isn't. I don't get paid for any of this. I don't get sponsorships. I just do this, you know? Um, again, I do it for the love of the game, not to play the game. I create content, and I create, and I like cosplay, and I do photo shoots, and I read, and I write book reviews, all that kind of stuff. I do that all as a bit of good fun. I do that because I enjoy it. I don't do it because I need to. You know? If I felt I needed to, I wouldn't do it. I'm very avoidant like that. No, but in all seriousness, if I felt that I needed to, I would only get into that position because I wanted to do it too. But if I felt like someone was like asking an obligation of me, I would just be like, no, no. So it's never been, content creation has never been obligatory to me like that. I started Paper of Hemlock as a way to get into reading. It's why my logo is a book. Also, shout out to my friend Kasha, who made both my Paper Hemlock logo and my Fabric Hemlock logo. I love her dearly. She's the best. The whole Paper Hemlock thing for me was about getting back into reading, right? And so that was my external motivation, I guess, because I always needed external motivation when I started this. But when I got back into reading, over my internship, my external motivation was Charlie and Dylan. I was buddy reading books with both of them. So I needed to keep up, I needed to keep up with it. So I would read with them. So I could read, so I could keep up with, what we needed to read for the week. That was important. And then furthermore, with the internship, there would be slow days. There would be slow periods where I just didn't have a ton to do. Or, or I would finish my work early, but because I was working in office, I couldn't just leave. Um, so instead of just sitting scrolling on my phone, I would bring a book and I would read. So instead of again, scrolling my phone while waiting to see if anyone emails me about anything or has any tasks for me, I would read. And that was way more, not productive, because I would have been reading on my phone anyway. I would have been reading anyway, but it felt more productive. And it also appeared more productive. I'll give myself that. It appears more productive to read a physical book. So, if you are a reader who has sort of fallen out of love with the act of reading, or if you want to be a reader and you don't know how to start that journey, that's okay. It's hard. Reading can be hard. The action of reading can be difficult. It is difficult to find the time, it is difficult to find the energy. Sometimes a book can be daunting. Like, again, I'm reading the Miss March series. I'm currently on Hero of Ages. I am 84 pages in. This book is 724 pages long. I think you can see why I'm a bit intimidated to keep reading. This is a long book. I am a little scared. Just a little. Also because I know that the next thing I'm going to be reading is going to be, Warbreaker isn't that long, but I know that the next series I'm going to be reading is going to be, the Stormlight Archives, which the books are longer than this. I'm very scared of those. It's okay if the book is daunting. It's okay if you need to, go read something simple and easy. Legends and Lattes was great for that because it was pretty, the story is pretty straightforward. The writing is pretty simple. Not that it isn't, well written or anything and that there aren't, complex things going on, but the way you get to those complex things is relatively straightforward and simple. They're not, Travis Baldree isn't hiding anything behind, esoteric language or multi-layered inferences. It's just kind of barely below the surface, which is exactly kind of what you need when you're looking for something a little bit easier to comprehend. And that's good. That's okay. A book doesn't need to be the most jaw-dropping thing you've ever read in your life to be a good book. Get that out of your head immediately. It just needs to be fun and good. That's it. So again, I'm going to say, if you are just wanting to get into reading and you struggle with reading, or you want to get back into it, it's okay if you only read 1 or 2 books a year. You're still a reader. I mean, I would hope you would read more than that, because I like to read more than that. But again, even if you read 1 book a month, that is more than the average person. The average American reads about 12 books a year. However, this is an average, this is a mean, not a median. Your median is going to sit squarely in no books, because over 65% of Americans have not read a book within the past year. So if you've read more than 0 books in a year, you will have read more than your average American. Congratulations. Yeah, because the bell curve for that sits squarely in 0 people. And then there's people like me, and people like other, bookish content creators, booktubers, bookstagrammers, book talkers, who read extortionate amounts of books. That is not a goal you need to aim for. Read more than 0 books. Finish more than 0 books, and congratulations, you will have read more than your average American. Maybe that isn't the benchmark you want to aim for, but my quick Google does not show global number and does not show Ireland specifically, so we're going with American numbers here. I mean, just aim to read more than your average American. Your average American, based off of the median number, reads zilch. Zip nada. Also, try different mediums. When I struggle with a book, when I was, trying out reading more and more, I'm pulling up my story graph again. I read a few ebooks, and I listened to a couple audiobooks, and that helped a lot. Having a new medium helped a lot when I was struggling, but when I was starting to read, it helped a lot. It was also like a bit dangerous because I could just sit and like, because I always sit and scroll on my phone. I always sit and read fanfic on my phone. An ebook on my phone, equally dangerous. I will just sit and just like, whoop. Like, that's how I get through a book in a day. Is an ebook. Yeah. I just sit and read the ebook and then I'm just like, oh god, where did the time go? Oh. But yeah, no, if you struggle with like physical books or you don't have a lot of space, get ebooks on your phone or your tablet. If you don't like Amazon, which real and fair, you should be able to buy um ebooks and audiobooks that you can download onto any sort of like audio music app or onto the like native like books app on your device. Publishers will generally sell them or the author's own website will sell them. So when I read Who Watches This Place, I read Who Watches This Place digitally on an ebook. I read that in like 6 hours total because I had to like go places and do things, but like actual reading time probably more like 3 hours. I bought that ebook from Amy Clarkin's. No, I brought it from O'Brien's website. I bought it from O'Brien's own website. So, you can always check the publisher's website or the author's website if the author has a website. And sometimes they will have the EPUBs on there if that is more accessible. If you're reading from an independent author, an indie author, you're more likely to find an EPUB than you are an audiobook. But there's no harm in looking for that or asking even the author if they would consider getting an audiobook recorded. If there's enough requests that it seems like a viable investment, they may invest in getting a voice actor to do an audiobook. Usually if it's an independent author, they will probably have an EPUB on their website. So you can always check that as well. No harm in it. Yeah, so if you're struggling with reading, try a different medium. Sometimes a different medium is all you need. That's kind of my journey as a reader. Been a reader all my life. The TLDR is I've been a reader all my life. I repeatedly fell in and out of love of the act of reading. Currently in love with the act of reading. Content creation has been a huge part of me getting that love back. I don't recommend this particular path for everyone because content creation will not make everyone happy. It makes me happy. Will not make everyone happy. Do not try content creation if feel free to dip your toe in content creation. I'm never going to tell anyone not to be a content creator if they really want to be. But don't feel like if you are not fulfilled by it that you are suddenly like a failure of being a reader. Like, I think there is a huge thing going on right now of like, oh, are people reading performatively? No, okay, I don't give a shit, frankly, if you're reading performatively. You're reading more than 65% of Americans. Cool. That's awesome. We're in the middle of an anti-intellectual crisis and World War III. I think a little bit of performative reading is the last thing we need to worry about. A little bit of performative reading might mean that they actually intake a bit of information. Shocking. Regardless, don't let anyone like tell you that you're being performative or that you're being fake because you picked up a new hobby or because you've started reading again or because you start talking about reading more publicly. Who cares? Who cares? People will always talk. Best thing you can do is kind of ignore them. Unless you've actually done like something wrong. People having opinions about like the way you make your coffee and the fact that you read a book is not that big of a deal. And again, I'm kind of a privileged white woman by saying that. Obviously, people can be mean, at least in this particular regard. So what if people think it's performative? You're reading. Cool. Good job. That's all I care about, really. We're in an information crisis. Who cares if you're doing it to get girls? Or men. Who cares? You're reading something. Obviously, I'm being a little bit facetious and simplifying, and obviously there are exceptions that prove every rule and all that kind of stuff. But just pick up a book. It's worth it. It's worth it. Whether you pick up a physical book, an EPUB, or an audiobook, pick up a book. You will thank yourself. And you'll also get to tell that you're more well-read than most Americans. And I think that's something we can all aspire to be. If you like this video, please like, share, subscribe, comment below. YouTubey things. All that. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram. If you want to see more day-to-day updates, subscribe here if you want to just see it all digested up in a weekly vlog at the start of every week. If you have any video ideas you want me to make, please leave those below. If you have your own story, your own reading journey that you want to talk about, leave it below as well. I'm happy to read. I'm happy to read your thoughts and opinions, unless they're mean, in which case I might not. Anyway, till next time. Ta!